You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney, and joining me, as always, is my trusted co-host, Ben Triplett. Ben?
What's cracking?
What's cracking? I was going to ask you about where the heck are your morals today?
I don't know. I left them at home.
Well, morals are all actually a type of mushroom.
Morale? Yeah.
Morals?
Morales.
The morals?
I don't know.
Morals.
Honestly,
What are your morals?
I know what you're talking about,
Yes.
but I don't speak French. So.
I've eaten them before. I had a friend that was a forager.
Ooh.
And would go foraging and then bring stuff back. That was like my first forte into eating really weird looking mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
But they are quite delish.
We have this dream that Baby T will be able to forage and
Wait,
build
Pause.
structures.
Pause on this, because you need to add context to what you're talking about that I do not believe you're throwing shade on a
broached.
situation. Yeah, we've not done this on the air.
Okay, I'm not. Kelly is pregnant. We're having a baby.
Yay. So yes,
But we will
co-host Ben is going to have a tiny co-host.
Yeah, no, we have dreams of the child learning to forage and homestead and all these sorts of things. So I guess that goes along with, we've always talked about babies being born with beards.
Oh, yes.
So
maybe
it'll be born with a beard. I don't know.
Again, I've told you this, but I don't know if I've told our listeners this. Our dear friend, Jorge, that we both know, is a man that is, he's going through a program, and I mean, this is pretty scintillating stuff. Something like curriculum and, the whole development of curriculum. So he's getting his doctorate in something involving curriculum or creation of curriculum and all those things. And so he was reading through all these other books really about how education is different around the world, like contextually, because, the one thing it just came from, and I need to take a picture on my phone because I love this picture. He's shown it to me. It's like this black and white picture, and it's a kid in Russia. I'm guessing not even one. That's probably
with a baby bottle of vodka.
No, I would love that. No. But he has like a sickle.
Oh, like a scythe or something?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so they actually had him out in the field with everybody else. And so you have like this, this large curved sharp object that, again, if you just start teaching the babies young, they can clear a field.
Or cut their hand off.
Or that.
Or clear a field.
I was going positive. Wait for throwing negative shades on this. You're talking about, I'm just saying if the Russians can do it, you guys can totally do it.
Maybe. We'll see.
But I've also known some crazy Russian friends who also had sent me a news article where they had a rash outbreak of people dying in Russia, because oftentimes people can be crazy there because it's actually really sad. They were stealing aftershave and drinking it because they thought it was a good way to get a buzz.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good way to smell pretty nice and tasty. But
I did drink a bottle of perfume as a child and got drunk. It was an accident, but yes, I did do that.
Wait, the getting drunk was the accident, or actually just the drinking of the perfume?
The drinking of the perfume.
Okay.
Yeah. The drunk was intentional. No, I mean, I was like
wait.
One.
Is this a real story?
Yeah, it really is. Or maybe like two, because I climbed up on my parents' dresser and just downed a whole bottle of perfume. So I guess, now that I think about it, I guess I have been drunk before.
Wow. I'll have to try that when I get home.
This is strangely related to the topic too.
I will get home and get my Elizabeth Taylor's White Diamonds that I just use for special occasions, and I'll just crack off the top and
Chanel number 5.
just take it straight down. Actually, Ben, I think you bested the Russians on that one. So
yeah, I don't know. They
Screw
were
you,
drinking
commies.
aftershave. I was like gender bending, drinking the perfume. So they wouldn't approve of that.
That's amazing. Yeah. So
speaking of morality
and drinking perfume. That was
dogs
good.
eating pot brownies.
Actually, yeah, it was really weird. We just have a total article about little children drinking perfume. So I never knew that fact about you, and it's really odd. No, what we're doing is the Barna Group has actually come out with a bunch of research, really what they're calling the end of absolutes, the America's New Moral Code. This came about a week or so ago, and we really wanted to talk about the way that we view morality in kind of culture today, and a lot of the stuff they found out, it'll be more interesting as we talk through it, and we'll get off topic because that's just what we do,
and already have done
plenty. But with that, what you begin to do is you begin to see just how different generations view things differently. And I think how in many ways each generation likes to think that they're viewing it correctly. So it's kind of like it's this weird thing of each one feels like they have absolutes in their way of viewing the world, and the other ones are wrong. And so just moving forward with a few terms for us to be able just to wrestle with, so we're not necessarily mincing words as we're going through this. So because it is funny, like these terms, I feel like I do this a lot too, but I hear people throwing around what is a millennial. What is a Gen Xer, all this other kind of stuff. And I think it's very murky in what is the start and stop points of all this kind of stuff. And so just for conversation and just to be on the same page, we'll kind of read off the definitions and then we'll hop into the talk. So at least you know what we're going through here. And so millennials would be individuals born between 1984 and 2002. Gen Xers would be between 1965 and 1983, which is kind of the baby busters / Gen Xers, which that's kind of a weird thing. They're squishing them together.
Baby busters. I like that.
Hey, baby name.
Buster?
You got a baby Buster.
That would remind me too much of Arrested Development. I can't.
That's even better.
He would be like a 40-year-old grad student.
Except for don't let him go swimming with seals.
Yes.
He
would be all right.
Yeah.
Because his left hand would be gone.
Yeah.
A little Arrested Development humor there.
Oh, yes. Have you ever thought of, speaking of that, baby names, Tobias?
I don't know if I would want my child to be that messed up.
Tobias Triplet? That has a good ring to it.
Toby. Yeah. The Office and Arrested Development there.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anytime I think of Tobias Fuki, it just makes me laugh. I'll just end it there. So we have, millennials, we have busters and Xers. We have the baby boomers, which were born between 1946 and 1964, and the elders of what people will call anyone before like 1945. And what they will, and so I think those are just kind of good moving forward. Just general terms, so we know what we're talking about. They'll be talking about folks that they'll say practice faith or practicing Christians in this document that we're kind of going through here. And so practicing Christians are people that would say that they are regularly attending religious services, and for them, for what regular means now is once a month.
Can we also? I don't know if we probably lose a lot of people by me just talking about qualifying everything before we actually talk about.
No, go for it. I think that's interesting. It's really funny that now I do understand that that there are different. There's always different issues during different time periods. There's different causes. There's different things that are popular, and all that kind of stuff moves and it flows. But I've never liked necessarily being categorized as this, that, or the other.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like to saying since you or I or or Gen Xer that this is how you think. This is how you are. This is how we always wear flannel and we like to work. I mean,
we value work or something like that.
Yeah, it's I overgeneralizations I feel like are extremely patronizing, which is funny that we're hopping into a study that's going to talk about overgeneralizations and things like that
effects.
too. So I feel. Go ahead.
But there are some trends there, I think.
Oh, sure. I just think
kind
that
of where we're coming from.
things are more nuanced.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just wanted to also throw out on the table that we're talking about morality today, which is something we talked about before the show. Just morality basically is dealing with like right versus wrong, and that there is, a right way to do something, a wrong way to do something, or there is, a right thing to do and a wrong thing to do. And also, I think it's really important to point out that this study is kind of asking people whether they believe in absolute morality, which would be that there is one right thing and there's one wrong thing to a given like question or situation. And, that we have like access to that knowledge to some extent. And that the other end or the other like option people are given is relative. So that like, things are right and wrong is constructed within your community, and that, it just depends on where you are and what situation you're in as to whether, right or wrong, like how right or wrong will function. I just think it's important to point out that those are the only two kind of things we're talking about. Or I think there's also maybe an option for like ambivalent, or like I haven't thought about it or something like that.
True. Yeah.
But I don't know. I just want to throw that out there because I think it's important that we always ask kind of where is our question coming from? What specifically is the question we're asking, and how can that influence kind of the data, quote unquote, that we're getting?
Well, and so delving into absolute truth, I'm going to ask you to give me the absolute opinion on things.
The absolute opinion?
Yes, because whatever you say is the absolute truth.
Because an opinion wouldn't be absolute truth.
You're right. I want you.
You want the facts.
I want
just
facts
the facts,
from you.
ma'am.
Just the facts. Even though, again, this is why we're getting nuance within this. That things being absolute kind of gets a little bit weird because you'll have your own perspective, opinion, cultural baggage, background, everything else like that too going into it. So,
would you like a baby bottle of absolute?
Oh, I just want some perfume right now.
I need to.
Would perfume? Okay,
that one for that joke. That was terrible.
So, do you have any recollection? Like, does the perfume smells a certain way going in?
I have no recollection.
Does it?
This is a story that I'm told by my mother generally. She also jokes about to her the funny part was that my diaper smelled like perfume for like a week.
That's what I'm asking. That's you answered my question. That's what I was looking for.
She thought that was the funny part.
Oh, that's
not that I was.
That's like your parents are like, we're never changing this diaper. It just smells so good.
Like wobbling around, drunk on perfume. Anyway,
okay, so. So I'm just going to just ask you just a bunch of situations that I want you to give the absolute truth.
Okay.
Spaghetti or pizza?
Pizza.
Absolutely.
Always.
Okay.
Always pizza.
Apples or oranges?
Neither.
Okay. This is some good stuff.
Ambivalent.
Okay. You just rattled off. We were talking earlier before the show about different superhero genre movies because you like to. It's a thing you do with your folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll say Deadpool or Civil War.
Oh, the movie?
Yeah, the movies. Not the character.
Probably Deadpool.
Deadpool. Okay. Taking naps or staying up late.
Gosh, I feel like you'd have to do both. Probably staying up late. I'm not a huge nap person.
Okay. Because I'm just making this up. Okay, so you're getting this idea is that...
I love that these are the ends of the spectrum. Taking naps or staying up late.
I know. I don't know. I was just kind of spitballing on those. But
I was hoping you would go Superman or Batman because there is an absolute truth in that.
Okay.
It's always Batman, always.
It's always Batman.
Never Superman. Superman is the worst comic book hero ever.
Well, Batman plays dirty.
That is an absolute truth.
He'll get the job done, and Superman is like too busy like rescuing kittens.
Batman's interesting. He's relatable. He's like somewhat believable, even though I'm not sure someone could go around the world and learn all martial arts by the time they're like a 20-year-old.
Jean-Claude?
There's like meaning there. Superman's just this ideological. He's boring.
Okay, so again, so
So I
that
just
was
alienated all Superman fans there.
people just stop tuning in on this. Thanks a lot, Ben. No, so yes, I mean, absolutes, being able to say this is exactly the way it is. It has always been that way forever. There's no changing it, and I am the one who knows it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think, and this ends up being why this kind of stuff matters. And actually, I think we'll probably pick it apart saying in a certain sense it doesn't matter, but it ends up mattering a lot. Like all these kind of stats and stuff end up mattering a lot to folks in the religious world.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to know who is keeping the faith, who is being orthodox, who is doing the right stuff, and then on the flip side, who is the heretic, who's doing the wrong stuff. Who do we need to kick out? Who do we need to criticize? And all this other kind of stuff. And so it ends up being this weird just dichotomy between finding the absolutes in life. Whereas I think that like we had on like a past show where we really feel like that in many ways the call of Jesus is also to kind of embrace the murkiness in life. And embrace the God on the margins or the God in the dirty places. And it's not simply just this or that.
Mm-hmm.
Type of a situation.
To live in the tension.
Okay, so yes, to live in the tension. So that was a very long beginning for us to get to this point. So what they began to do, so the Barna Research Group, they have this new research that is really beginning to reveal what they would call a growing concern about the moral condition of our nation. Which, again, I like how I've heard you say before, Ben, even the question, the presupposition that they had before even doing this research is also very telling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're coming at it like asking a question is coming from a direction. It's not like the questions just exist out there on their own and we're all sort of like going to pick one and that's the one we're concerned about. I mean, the question comes from your world and the problems that are created by your experience in your world.
Well, and as anyone who has ever sat around a Thanksgiving table, or any time that you're visiting folks of your family that would be from an older generation, and if they happen to be from a Christian, more or less conservative Christian perspective, at least I have grown up in this whole idea that, like, for lack of better words, there's this whole worldview that the world's going to hell. Mm-hmm. That somehow...
In a
handbasket, that it used to be an idyllic place. Back in the 40s and the 50s, sin didn't happen. Everyone, just farted rainbows and everybody was moral and
I wish I could hit the sarcasm button on that, but you're not being
sarcastic. Crime never happened. Everybody was loving to each other. People loved Jesus. Everyone went to church. Everyone believed. And then now, fast forward to now, we're at where we're at now, where we're in the end times. I just know. I mean, I've been around so many churches where that ends up just being like the bell they continue to ring. Oh, Jesus, come back soon. Jesus, come back soon. This is the end times. We're immersed in the end times. Look at what's happening in the United States because we're in the end times. Mm-hmm. And so it ends up kind of being this whole thing. It's because of all that we've lost. Which the one thing that always gets back to, and it doesn't get brought up because apparently I've just been around a lot of old white people, is when they again talk about like the 40s and 50s being like this idyllic time where neighbors were there for neighbors and everything else like that. They somehow forget about civil rights movement.
Yeah, that's the first thing my brain went to.
Yeah, other things along that nature that needed to majorly change in our country.
Like we can all eat at the same table as long as we all look like each other.
That's true. Well, when the restaurants were separated,
exactly.
It was easier to get a table.
Right.
I didn't
like that. If that is the idyllic world, then I will choose now.
And so, yes.
I'm okay with now.
And also, I mean, really, there's no internet, no MP3s.
I mean, that's the worst part.
I mean, the techno, I don't know.
Sarcasm.
Thank you. One. Yeah, this and for those of you that may be listening for the first time, you are listening to a show called Snarky Faith Radio, so there is going to be heavy doses of sarcasm smeared out through this whole thing. So again, yes, this study begins with the presupposition that there's already something going on. And so within this, they're trying to kind of talk about what is the moral condition of our country, and then being able to ask the elders, the boomers, and all these, and trying to figure this out. So it says here, like in the study, it says a majority of American adults across age group, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, and political ideology express concern about the nation's moral condition. 8 and 10, 80% of the people 8 and 10, even though that's 80%, that doesn't sound like very much people they're asking in this. Or are they just breaking it down and I'm reading it very obtusely? When it says 8 and 10, overall believe that there is a problem with the nation's moral condition.
I just think that's worded strangely.
Yeah.
I think if you had 10 people, then 8 of them would say this. Not that they asked 10 people.
That's right. This is definitive.
That would be a very skewed.
I walked into the parking lot and asked people questions and now published.
Hey, buddy.
No, I assume that's where they were going with it. I thought that was worded really odd. And so what you begin to see is when you begin to ask like the elders and the boomers, a lot of them would decry the problem of our moral condition, that we're losing it, that it's sliding away from us, and then only Trump can bring it back, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Some people
Trump was not in there. Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
Sarcasm.
Thank you. That was not an endorsement of a political candidate.
Not some people.
This message was not approved by.
Some people would agree with you though, so that's like a half sarcasm button.
Right? Yeah,
and I couldn't cut it off halfway, but
yeah. And so, okay, I'll just say this: I was trying to be jaded, and I was trying to just kind of throw like a veil over. Okay, so let's just be honest, my dear listeners. I had my in-laws visiting recently, and luckily enough, I'm pretty sure they don't listen to this. And if they do, I'll hear about it in a subversive way later. And I remember sitting across from them and them just going off on just how Trump is there, man. He's it. And he's the one that's going to fix America. He's the one that's going to be God's tool to fix everything. The tool part, I can see that he's a tool, but this went on for an hour, and you will all be proud of me because I really didn't argue with them, because I was able to say there is no point to this conversation.
Mm-hmm. This is not a fight worth fighting.
And it just made me drink my beer faster.
Yeah.
To dull the pain.
I do think that's a good example of the sort of absolute truth thought, though, because it sort of governmentally, we're basically given two choices, right? I mean, there are many choices out there. There are many solutions to the given problems in our country, and yet we see it as there is either this person or this person, which infuriates me. And I'm hoping at some point that maybe people will see that we don't have to have just two choices. But again, our opinions don't reflect WCOM's opinions.
Our opinions barely reflect us.
Yeah, that's true. On a given day,
yeah,
we're maybe relativists ourselves. But yeah, so that kind of reflects that, it's either Republican or Democrat, Trump or Hillary, and you just sort of dig your heels in on your side once the...
You saying that made me so sad.
Why?
I'm crying on the inside.
Oh, yeah.
Our only options are Trump or Hillary. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I mean, and I think some people have settled that this is how it is. And I do think it comes from a certain perspective of, in an earlier show, we talked about tension and this sort of idea that there needs to be a resolution or perspective and answer that we can stand on so that we don't have to live in tension. And ironically, I think the government was made so that our government was set up in such a way that one person would not have enough power to make that much of a difference, which is why I don't flip out too much about the presidential race. But what it represents about what's going on in government right now is kind of scary to me. But yeah, I think that there is even supposed to be at least a tension within the government. I'm not sure if that tension's necessarily there. I think it gets projected through media. I think that there is a lot more agreement behind the scenes than we actually know about, because it keeps people paid and it keeps people happy. and they don't have to sacrifice quite as much.
As long as those people aren't the general constituents.
No.
That are being represented. Those people.
Yeah, these are the people in power, not the people that are
the greasing of palms.
Supposed to be in power.
Yes.
Well, like we're supposed to be in power. They're supposed to be representing us, but I don't know if that necessarily happens either. So, yeah, but anyway, all that to say, like, I do think it's interesting that this sort of like bipartisan system does reflect, I think, that sort of absolute truth as well, that like one or the other is supposed to be like the solution for a given problem. And people believe that because they do fixate so much on the presidential race and what it represents, that, you know, there's a Democrat in power right now in the presidential, the seat of president, and that means that means something, that one side is one out or the other side is one out, when in reality, I think that, and, you know, we'll get into this, that people actually see morality as more of a matter of consensus. That is kind of the way the government was set up. And if you go back to sort of the philosophical roots of like social contractarianism and like we're entering into like a contract with one another so that we won't kill each other. And
I've not signed that yet with you, Ben.
No, we don't all sign it. Some of us are just born here.
Oh, I thought you were just talking about between me and you.
Yeah, we have no contracts.
Okay.
No. We just have this weird tension between us,
and there's
awkward tension.
There is a duel clause that we can, if we need to duel at some point,
pick some sort of absurd weapon, like a Nerf gun.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should do that one day.
Or just like, when you were like in middle school, did you guys ever do those things where you'd like fold up paper and you'd like real tight and you'd use a rubber band and like shoot it at people?
Or quarters was what we did.
Oh, okay.
Which is actually pretty violent too.
Yeah, we would. You'd always have the idiot kid that would put a thumbtack facing outward on the thing that you're shooting, and you're like sitting in the middle of the class, and you're like, "Ow!" Right. Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, you know, the idea of democracy is to kind of live in tension and to live within sort of the consensus majority of what's going on, so that we don't have like warring factions all of the time. Mm-hmm. Even though I think kind of where we have ended up is that we do have sort of warring factions.
But I loved how you just boiled something that was very, very interesting down that I think a lot of people disagree with, but I love how you said it. So that maybe I will misquote you on this, but that morality is essentially a consensus. Well, that's like in and amongst culture. I think, to some degree.
I think in our culture, that was one of the assumptions that was made in like building our government and building our like national identity. And I think that that's reflected in the numbers in the study, that people say, generally, I think even though some people would even, you know, like practicing Christians, for example, would say, I believe, you know, that the Bible tells me that I should do this. But then they also have this underlying assumption that it's more of a kind of majority rules type thing, because that's democracy, right?
Yeah, you're right. But it's democracy. But this whole idea, though, on a deeper level, and I promise we'll hop back into this stuff. I'm sorry, you just made my brain explode a little bit. Well, think about this. I mean, this idea of consensus and that like morality through some sort of form of consensus. I mean, when we begin to look at what is like the normative evangelical view of what would be orthodox, like in America, that there has been a bit, and I think some of this is part of historical tradition, but there has to have been an element of consensus for what we're saying is important and what's not important. Like what verses of the Bible do we harp on? What do we ignore? What do we throw? You know, what do we make the hallmarks of what we're doing? And what are ones that we're just like, oh, these are suggestions. You know what I mean? And I think that again, when we begin to, because we'll hop in. I mean, this very point, I think is really what I think the study is trying to bring out in many ways. But you'll see Christians that believe that there is an absolute truth. Mm-hmm. There's an absolute morality to things, and all of that is inherently in the Bible.
Yes, yeah.
But if you look historically, and even if you look at the Bible as a whole, there are definitely things that are elevated and ones that are kind of pushed back down, or ones that are ignored in this, you know, and things like that. And so I think that, but the history of walking this out, some of this has to have happened through consensus. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, I just bring it up because I like to. I know I like beat this drum probably every week on the show, but there are kind of historical underpinnings to the things that we say and do, and I just like to unearth them and throw them out there on the table. People might disagree with me, but and another thing I think that's functioning underneath that sort of consensus model is capitalism.
Yeah.
Because capitalism, I mean, it does kind of function on this assumption that like everyone should do kind of what's best for his or herself, and that will work for like the greater good. So there is kind of an individualism in there, but there's also like a pragmatism, like whatever works now for everyone is what we should be doing because it generates the most, value or profit. And I know economists are probably going to like smack my hand with a ruler, but because I'm generalizing a lot. But I do think that there are those assumptions at play that we're talking about like what's going to work now and what can generate the most benefit now. It comes a lot from our kind of philosophical heritage and our like structural heritage.
Well, I was talking to somebody the other day that was complaining to me that they were essentially saying they just didn't feel like, they had a lot of guilt about the fact that church didn't make sense to them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an adult, and gosh, I don't know, like based upon the age limits there, like a buster, maybe a boomer. I'm not exactly sure.
Mm-hmm.
But he was just talking about that. And so he was just asking me like, well, why is it that I'm not feeling fulfilled being in church anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And so we just began to talk through this whole idea about how culture, because again, and for those, because I know we have folks in like Southeast Asia and other areas like that listen to us. So just recognize that I have no idea if the context that we're speaking to makes sense to you, but we're speaking of this from the American weird capitalistic church tradition that we speak about quite often. And but we just started talking through just how one, first of all, the church comes out of culture. Like the culture reflects the church, and church reflects the culture to some degree. And that when you mention capitalism, when you begin to look at it, also most of our churches today, even though I understand we'll say they're a nonprofit, but they're structured like a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the things that we measure that are important in churches are very business-like.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get enough butts in the seats. You need to get enough people involved in this, that, and the other. Just the metrics that we're using to gauge these types of churches and ministries are from the business world. We've taken all this approach to it. And so when you begin to think about the things that we, again, preach, or the parts of the Bible that are pushed out more, well, you're going to do the things that, we want Jesus victorious. We want abundant life. We want, you can think of all the corny names that have come up for non-denominational churches, like New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I was going to let you have that one.
Elevation. It's all about getting higher, right?
It is. Well, yeah, but all these names that are
we're going to be above you.
Absolutely. And so when we do this, but it's all marketing schemes. We're not going to talk about, yes, Jesus wants you to sell your possessions and go like live in poor areas and help those and put your life on the side while you're helping to heal the world. Mm-hmm. That doesn't sell. That doesn't sit on a bumper sticker. That's not going to sell books. People will go, oh yeah, that's so great. Like that's the revolutionary Jesus that we're talking about. Because honestly, I feel like this. I feel like in many ways, if you want to talk about politics, which you brought up earlier, think of like and I can just think of listening to elders that I know talking about Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. Oh, it'll never work. All this is pie in the sky stuff. It's idealism. All this idea of no. He needs all this kind of stuff, which again is honestly, I think if we were honest about it, that's how most churchgoers would talk about Jesus. He's just too idealistic.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's too much of a stretch. So. Revolution, it's just too much of a cost. I'm going to go pragmatically with this person that sells books.
Not to conflate Bernie Sanders with Jesus, but yeah, that I think it brings up a good point that a lot of times people will like miss the point. But
Hey,
they don't.
They're both Jewish people with a following.
That's true. Yeah. I feel like, people sort of miss the forest for the trees
Oh yeah.
when they get on that. But I don't know. I just brought the point up because I like to. I feel like it's more than just rationale that's going on. It's that we're sort of in the. I'm trying to think of David Foster Wallace gave a graduation speech, and this is going to be misusing his phrase a little bit, but have you heard that? It's called "This Is Water," and he talks about how people, you graduate, you get in a job, you get in a routine, and you just sort of become one with the routine after a while, and you don't ever stop to like look outside of it and say, it's like a fish that swims around in the ocean all the time, and they're not going to like think that they're in water. We think about fishes being in water because we're outside of it, right?
Yeah.
But the fishes are fishes. Is that right? The fish are swimming around in water, and not. I mean, they're probably not aware of anything anyway. But if you were swimming around in water all the time, you're not going to like reflect upon that. You're just going to assume it. And so I think it's good every once in a while to try to like pop your head out and sort of see what you're swimming around in and remind yourself, we are swimming around in something, so.
When we speak of politics, I can't say on the air what that something is.
Yeah.
It doesn't normally smell like perfume in the diaper.
That's true. We're not drinking. Yeah. We're drinking something else.
Okay, so all that to be said to get to this point. And so there's just a few things I just wanted to throw out that they had here. And we'll hit towards the end of this. We'll hit like what their conclusions were, but I think the interesting part is honestly what we're talking about right now is I think what's getting missed in the mix of all this. Which again, I'm not necessarily like trying to nail Barth to the wall with this whole thing, but the questions that you're asking these people that you're interviewing, you're in a certain sense already leading them in a direction.
Yeah.
And I guess we've already done that, but I mean, it just, all of that kind of stuff can't be stated enough. And the fact that it's not just that there's always a reason, like why even do this study? Like why even go after this? Why? Well, because it's of interest to the churches. It's of interest to pastors. It's of interest to people who are on the radio and like to just tear things apart. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they did it just for us.
Yes, they wanted us to.
I mean, that's my assumption. I mean, that's the way I look at everything. Absolutely, it's just for me. So here's one of their quotes, and so it says like while most American adults agree that culture plays some role in establishing moral norms, a majority also agree that, quote, the Bible provides us with absolute moral truths, which are the same for all people and all situations without exception. And so that was like 59%. And I'm assuming of the boomers that they were asking about this. But, I'm going to hit that just again so that they're talking about absolute moral truths, which are the same for all people in all situations without exception. Like that statement is so wrought. It just, I don't know. It just with many things that make my skin kind of crawl, like the absoluteness.
Baggage. Yeah. What's interesting though? I read this was years ago, and I've been interested in that kind of idea of how do we hold. I really feel like people still hold absolutes, or they at least hold perspectives higher. Some perspectives higher than others. Yeah. Even though I met just being around a college campus. You have a lot of people playing with ideas and exploring and. I actually had one guy, we used to go out and listen to pit preachers and things like that because it can be really interesting just to see human behavior in situations like that. I had someone come up to me and try to argue like the like purest form of relativism that you could ever like imagine. I mean, he just changed he claimed absolute things like, I believe in God. I believe in Buddha. I believe in the devil. I believe in this and that. And, this is true. Gravity's real. Gravity's not real. I mean, he just kept like changing because he wanted to prove the point that he wanted to be completely relativist. But anyway, just in those experiences of sort of exploring the question of, relativism and the impact of culture and social construction. And then do we still hold on to things that we, know to be true or we believe to be true? I saw a book in the thrift store when I was in the throes of all this stuff. It was a book of feminist critique of certain cultural assumptions, especially I think in certain cultures where women are treated in a certain way. It was interesting because a lot of people were critiquing relativism in this book. There were a lot of feminist thinkers because there was no way that they could accept that women would be treated in this way in these cultures. I thought it was really interesting that it raises its own questions that, I think especially when you, at least in my experience, when I talk with more kind of scientifically minded people, they're more comfortable with saying, like something a little more certain on some of these things. And they say, I'm not being biased. I've got like evidence, or I've really thought about this, reasoned it out, and this makes the most sense, or this is the most probable thing, usually is kind of the evidence, quote unquote, that's given. But even in those situations, and this drives people crazy, so I don't usually like throw this out there. I mean, you're not going to stymie anybody by going up to a scientist and telling them this, so don't do that. But there's still assumptions there. You're still working on some sort of assumption that probability is the best way to understand something.
Sure.
Or, that you can be certain about some things and not certain about others. That there are like facts and values and that those two things are completely different. I mean, those are all assumptions that you're bringing to the table. So I think even it's just an interesting dichotomy, I think, to draw, because even in the relativism, there are some absolutes. Does that make sense?
No, you're right. I mean, it's like, well, that's what had me think that statement, which just gets to me, that when we begin to talk about the absolute moral truths of the Bible, same for all people in all situations without exception. I mean, you even brought this up. I mean, first of all, let me just throw this in there. Like, are there timeless truths, that we can gain from the Bible? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Are there calls to compassion and all that kind of stuff that transcends, certain situations and stuff like that? Absolutely. But this idea that absolute with all time without exception, like you even said this earlier, like just think about what it was like for women to grow up in patriarchal societies. Mm-hmm. Do we take how women were talked about in certain times, or how there's scriptures there's dodgy scriptures about that is reflecting their understanding during their culture at a certain time in the history of the world that does not necessarily gel with where we're at today. Mm-hmm. And again, we're talking back probably, and this is going to sound, but like in the intellectual infancy period of mankind in many ways. I think as we begin to walk towards like the rise of the Greeks and the Romans, we begin to look at things from a different perspective. But even again, we've even just seen this only like in the last, 50 or 60 years, like have women been able to vote, in our country. So being able to say that the Bible has, is absolute truth for all times and all situations, I would talk about, ask women how they feel about that.
Yeah, really.
As people who've been in slavery that feel about, certain scriptures that, again, spoke to slavery, which was commonplace back then, and other things like that. I just think that this idea that we end up having like this measuring stick, that this, and that if the Bible is this huge moral measuring stick that is the same, and that somehow all of us read it exactly the same outside of culture, outside of history, baggage, perspective, everything else, and we can measure everything absolutely with it, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's coming to the scripture. I think it was Karl Barth that talked about holding like scripture as God versus, letting God be God, and then scripture is something else, and, it's related to God, but, I think at least in the churches that I grew up in, Christian traditions, more kind of conservative evangelical, it's like you come to the Bible with an attitude of certainty and trust. And what that does is it dismisses the fact that there might be questions or that you might be bringing something in from your perspective that's not quite right, which, it's a really kind of arrogant way of reading Scripture. And that's really rooted in history as well, of wanting to be certain about things, and that there are signs of the certainty, and people interpret that in different ways in different traditions. But yeah, and then growing up, things just fall apart when you start to see like questions come up in Scripture, and you can't ask those questions of Scripture because you're not allowed to, because I'm just supposed to trust. So, for some people, they're just like, well, I'm done with this. I'm done with this book because this is terrible. Other people might, come up with rationale and say, well, this is what this is saying, or we just need to accept the atrocity because there's some sort of truth in there, and I'm not sure what it is, but I'm just going to trust that it's there. And going on your example with the way that women have been treated over history, it's led to just awful things happening to people, either just by sort of a complicit acceptance of, well, I guess this is just what this means, and this is, what I should do, by both men and women. So for example, like in a puritanical society, if a young lady is accused of something and she has no voice to really be able to defend herself in front of a male authority figure, then she becomes evil. Or, if she does try to fight back or give her cause, then she becomes evil and labeled as, this or that sinful thing, or, the devil or whatever. And so, I'm just agreeing with you and rambling at this point, that it can be very dangerous to come to Scripture with that sort of blindness, that sort of hubris that's like covering over, like, what am I bringing to this? It's almost like, it reminds me of the guy, Oba or Oma or whatever the guy's name was, that just ran up to the ark with no forethought at all and, tried to save it from tipping over. And he got struck by lightning because he didn't realize kind of what was going on, and the gravity of coming to the Scripture with this sort of like blind hubris. Even if his intentions were good.
That made me, I was so confused for a moment because somehow my brain went straight to like Kim Han and like the Ark, like Noah's Ark. And I was just like, wait, where? I don't recall.
Oh yeah, not that Ark. Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you. My brain's just...
Indiana Jones Ark.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost.
No, but I think that you're right. Like when if we were to step into the situation, to be able to look at these things with absolute truth and all of this other stuff, and especially even when we approach Scripture, I feel like what that begins to do, it doesn't let Scripture speak to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? We come to it already knowing this, and as opposed to coming to it with a state of humility, being able to say, I don't know, and I want to wrestle this out, and I need to do this, because in certain essence, like if we're elevating the Bible to that high of a standard, it's almost like, then if that's that logic, then why do we need God?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
The Bible becomes God at that point.
Yeah, it's just God gave us everything, and then kind of just went peace out, and every once in a while steps in when he's angry with Haiti or other places because of whatever thing that I don't know. But but when we look at it from that perspective, that's just what begins to bug me. That I think that to approach the Scripture almost as a conversation about what I don't know, but really, being able to ask questions like, well, what is God's nature? Like, where is all of this? But even being able to take this like into prayer as well. Mm-hmm. I think it just takes a very different posture of being able to say, what can I learn, as opposed to, I already have this figured out.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why those other like statements make my skin crawl, because I feel like, it's like looking at something that's just, I don't know, like an eye chart on the wall or facts that are written up there. Like, that's what it is. We already figured it out for you. You don't need to think. You just need to say these things or know these things.
Yeah, it's this might be a little bit of a stretch, but I feel like it's a really modern way of approaching things, that this sort of scientific mind or the modern mind comes to the world, comes to the given, and tames it and controls it and says, how am I going to bear fruit out of this? How can I like rend this in a way that it's going to give me fruit and give me what I need or want, really. And I think people with that kind of modern approach of like certainty and that they want to come to the scripture in the same way, even though they might have convinced themselves that there is certainty in this, they're coming to the scripture and saying, I'm going to tame this thing. I'm going to make it say what I want it to say.
Yeah.
I'm going to control it so that it renders fruit that I need or really want at this point.
It can push my agenda. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have just a few minutes left, and what I want to do is I want to hit their conclusions, and then we can kind of unpack this, because I think that oftentimes when they begin to do all of this, it ends up being like the doom and the gloom of stuff. Like when Barna's done research about the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not like the nuns and the women in church, but the nuns, the people that would say they're spiritual but not religious, people that have walked away from church. And when we begin to do this, like it throws these grand shadows like over, the church in America, where they're like, well, what's going to happen? And you kind of either have like these just two different viewpoints in how to, I guess, walk it out. One, it's keep doing what we're doing, but try to do it better. Or two, you just kind of keep doing what you're doing and just assume everybody else is awful and the world is now turned into Sodom and Gomorrah. And what I think happens, because when I think I mentioned the story earlier, talking with my friend that's wanting to walk out of church, I was telling him, I don't think this thing that people are leaving church and that in many ways that churches are dying is a bad thing. I mean, I see it as an opportunity. And I think if the church continues to say, well, let's just keep doing what we're doing, but either do it better or just condemn people more, I think that's the wrong answer to the problem that we have. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the problem is where have we moved? Like, where have we moved off course? What have we done, and how can we change? Not change in a way that I'm saying change to accommodate people, because actually I think that's the problem of what's happened to the church in America is it's become so much about accommodating to people. You can go into like churches that end up having like playlands that look like McDonald's or play parks inside, and mm-hmm. we've accommodated so much that because we've just cared about advertising and getting butts in the seats and treating it like a business. You know what I mean? We've gone down this weird road that I think that these answers, while certain people may hear them in dire, like as a dire warning to the church, I see this as a great opportunity, is really what I'm getting at. And so just to throw to their conclusions here, like ultimately, and you've been hearing us get at this the whole time, they were saying millennials are more likely than any other age group in the study to say that moral truth is relative, while on the flip side, boomers are the most likely to say that moral truth is absolute, which is interesting that the elderly, like that it was the boomers and not the elderly, which I think, again, we're talking about culture. In this. And so finally they had that says Barna's research reveals the degree to which Americans pledge allegiance to the morality of self-fulfillment, a new moral code, as David Kenneman, president of Barna, argues, has all but replaced Christianity as culture's moral norm. So I think with that kind of being the conclusion, I want to just take a few minutes or maybe a minute and a half to be able to dissect this. We talk too much, but we are a talk show. But looking at that, like, I think their conclusions are just wrong when they begin to do that, because I feel like that they just end up pointing their finger at what they would say is more relativism, and it's because America has moved in the wrong direction. I just think it's become the church doesn't offer answers. The church doesn't fill the need, and the church expects a lot out of people that doesn't give them a ton back.
And maybe some areas or corners of the church have adapted or are struggling with the questions in new ways. It's just we tend to miss those things, because I think sometimes when something is so new or different, it's easy to either overlook those things or to just miss them because it's hard to recognize.
No, that's good. I think that's very good stuff. And I think that like this will be fun. It'll be fun because I think pastors will read this and just be able to wag their fingers at the evil culture and walk away from the study and really change nothing. Mm-hmm. And I think that,
just dig their heels in
and keep doing life the same way it is. And I don't know, when I begin to look at it, I think that I look at it through like a lens of hope. And the fact that I think that when we approach Scripture and realize that context matters. I was told it. Too many stories, but I've been told that context is wrong when you're looking at Scripture, like by a professor before. and all that kind of stuff just makes me like shrug my head. I'm like, excuse what, like what, you know. I think it's great that millennials are thinking, and I think it's just about the church being able to provide something that matters to them. Because if the way that they're giving the message now doesn't matter, I think there's something wrong with the way we're giving the message.
Yeah, or to address the problems that they see that other generations might not have seen. Yeah.
Well, all right. I think we've beat this drum into the ground, which is probably two different metaphors that don't even go together.
Beat the dead drum.
Yes, beat the dead drum. So as we get to the end of this broadcast, just a reminder, you can catch us on podcast at www.snarkyfaith.com. We love your feedback. Drop in reviews for us. If you're over on iTunes or Stitcher, talk to us. Give us ideas. Give us feedback on Twitter and on Facebook. But that is all we got this week, and we will catch you again next week. We are out of here.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Aqueduct Conference Centre was established in 1978 as a peaceful destination for small group meetings, special events, conferences, retreats, and weddings. For more information, go to www.aqueductcc.com. We are also sponsored by Lumen. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be better than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.